I'd like to start off firstly by introducing our guest speaker, Mabatho Seeiso. She's been in this industry since 2001, having joined from the oil sector. We're very interested to hear how that happened. And since joining, she's held numerous roles in the industry, been an independent board member and trustee on a number of retirement funds and insurers. Mabatho is also director of the Transformation Action Forum and sat on the advisory committee of the South African Pension Fund Investment Forum. Qualifications as well, a number of qualifications behind her, has an honours in economics and marketing from University of Wales and an MBA from Hull University. So welcome, Mabatho. It's a pleasure to have you. Before we get started, I'd like to also start off by saying thank you to both Kaitlin and Thembeka. Kaitlin is soon to be mom of twins, and Thembeka has recently become a mom. And when I say recently, I mean a couple of months ago. So thank you very much, ladies, for being here today. I'd like to kick off with you, Mabatho. So in your capacity as an independent board member and trustee, you joined this industry in January 2001 from a completely different sector. How did you find the transition into financial services, and can you share any words of wisdom for anyone looking to get into this industry or is sitting in this room has joined this industry from another sector?
Thanks, Naleni. I found the transition incredibly challenging. I moved from an industry where I was an expert in what I was doing and essentially came into another industry where I was starting from scratch. Now, from somebody who gained the sense of confidence from being brilliant at what you do, you can just imagine. I had a bit of an identity crisis. But from an advice point of view, in terms of somebody joining in, there are a few things that I did to try and make sure that I integrate myself into the industry and I set myself up to do well. The first is I started studying again. I actually have a third honors, another honors in financial analysis and portfolio management. But I thought it was important because the financial services industry, it has its own lingo. I was completely lost when I came in. And I also found that people were not necessarily, the oil industry was very people-oriented. I always say, leading people was considered important in financial services, not so much. Mm-hmm. Even as a leader, you were rewarded for being a technocrat. So it was very difficult on so many levels. That studying made a difference for me. But also one of the things that I did about a year after I joined the financial services industry, I started a support group for women in financial services. I needed a support group so that there are some things I went through, joining a patriarchal, alpha male environment that I thought was, my experiences were unique as a woman. Mm. And so that was one of the things that I did. But I think there are certain core things that you need to have in order to succeed in your chosen career. Part of it is making sure you build credibility. Credibility comes from building competence, but also having that support structure. It's just not just in the organization, but externally is important.
Thank you very much for those wise words. Thembeka, you've had quite an interesting journey as a South African working abroad. You joined M&G UK as an equity analyst, and less than a year later was promoted to portfolio manager on a couple of the strategies. So what were some of your successes and challenges in getting to that point?
Yeah. To be honest, I think the bulk of my challenges started in my investment banking career. And I think it's just learning how to navigate those that sort of, bolstered my ability to get through M&G's, environment. But generally, I think in investment banking, when first coming into the industry, I got a graduate role within Credit Suisse to work in their London office. And obviously feeling confident, I'm a UCT grad. And then when you get to the training program in New York, and you're like, and people are, introducing each other, saying, oh, where do you come? Which university do you go to? And everyone's Harvard and everyone's Oxford, Cambridge. And you're like, okay, well, and then gets to you and it's like, oh, University of Cape Town. I'm like, Cape Town has a university? And I think that essentially was the first time I had proper imposter syndrome. And it's something that I had to deal with when starting my career from an early age. And, to Mabatho's point, I think the biggest way of combating that was really just being super prepared all the time, like building up that credibility. So, I worked harder than, anyone in my year group. I just ensured, and I was looking at insurance, which is also a very complex sector. So I had to learn a very complex sector from scratch. But in doing that, what I learned was how to communicate a very complex sector very simplistically, because that's how I learned. And that created a lot of value for my hedge fund clients. And so that level of, using what you might think was a weakness as a strength is essentially how I managed to, navigate that working world. So by the time I got to M&G, I think a lot of those lessons that I'd learned along the way, being super prepared, trying to shift your weaknesses into strengths, asking questions, not being afraid to look less than smart just just because you wanted to learn. Those are the elements I think that really helped me, progress throughout M&G and also throughout the financial industry.
Well, thank you for that, Thembeka. I think it's important, especially for the Gen Zs in the room, if you're in here, that experience is critical and that you have to start somewhere and you learn and you continue learning. And that journey never ends.
Never.
Thank you, Thembeka. Kaitlin, your journey has been very similar to Thembeka's. However, yours has been in the South African business specifically, starting off as an analyst and then working your way through to portfolio manager. And in South Africa, as you know, females make up only 20% of the asset management industry in terms of investment professional representation. What can you share to those prospective young portfolio managers out here who also want to get to where you are in the future?
Yeah, so I think very similar to both these ladies is as females, we often have a tendency to want to over-prepare. So for your role, you want to be 100% ready for that role rather than sort of 60% ready and learn as you go. And so in that, I found myself wanting to study everything the whole time. And I thought the more I studied, the greater the confidence would be. But actually, every time you kind of finish a degree or a course, you realize I know a lot of the book stuff, but I still actually don't know a lot of the real life industry things. And I took something sort of clicked for me that half the issue is actually confidence and the ability to believe in yourself, because sitting in meetings for a while and listening to the rest of my team, I would go, oh, I actually did know what they were talking about. But I just didn't have the confidence to talk in a meeting or say it out loud. So I kind of went a different direction and really spent a lot of time with a life coach in terms of working out confidence and ways to improve debate and express your opinion and realize kind of that difference between opinion and fact, because I think a lot of this industry is opinion. It's not always fact. And I think it's much more comfortable to be in this place where everything is black and white and we know the answer. But that's just not this industry. And I think just getting comfortable with the more personal side of things is what probably helped the most. And then I think I was also very lucky in that I had a lot of male mentors actually who really helped me along the way. And I never felt discriminated against. I felt like I was part of the team, and people who had very good positions in the company were able to really help me learn and help me develop my voice. And so I'm also very grateful for the men in our organization who've been, I suppose, taken the time and been bold enough to really mentor other women. And so I suppose for the men out there, I think your role in all of it is absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Kaitlin. And following from that point, I think you'll all agree with me that when you're at university, asset management isn't really a career choice when you're talking to someone about your future. How do you feel about that? How would you go about changing that?
It's such a difficult one because my personal experience was that I had been interested in asset management from the beginning of university, and a lot of that had to do with my family. And so I was in a fortunate position where my parents had a lot of experience in the finance world, and that kind of introduced me to it. But I think all companies in the financial services industry have to make an effort at a university level and a school level to really teach people what it's about. And then even when you get into the working world, I mean, we've seen people who come through for interviews and they're desperate to be in, for example, front office of an asset management company, but they may not necessarily enjoy that type of work, but that's the part they know. And so things like grad programs, which M&G runs, where you can actually rotate through different divisions for a couple of years, are really helpful, because I think coming out of university and school, you just don't know what a job entails. You don't know what your personality suits. And so implementing more of those grad programs in different sectors, I think it could be hugely helpful.
I agree completely. And M&G have a number of those initiatives currently running both locally and offshore within our business to facilitate that, both internally and externally with universities specifically. Mabatho, you've held a number of roles since 2001 within asset management itself as director, portfolio manager, as well as head of institutional distribution at a number of large asset managers. What were some of your successes and challenges?
Yeah, so I think initially when I came into the industry, getting into a technical role was a big challenge for me. In a place where I didn't have a champion. I think the difference in the organization where I succeeded was that I had a champion. Secondly, I think it's okay to admit when you failed at something. I am not a spreadsheet person, and it's good to admit that.
Yes.
You know? And use that. I always say failure is something that redirects you to what's the right thing for you. I also learned from doing the personal mastery, which is one of the things I did as well, was undertaking work around personal mastery, so that confidence can't come from your work. It's a wrong place to build your confidence on. So for me, one of the things I did was transition into a place that I felt spoke to my strengths rather than my weaknesses. I mean, you know, my whole career had been built on strategy, business development, marketing. And so I transitioned back into that role. But I think it did help that as a differentiator, I had this technical knowledge that I'd gained from having been in a technical role that gave me competitive advantage. Even today, being a good member of the investment committee, that was it. But I think for me, the success came from the fact that I transitioned into a role that suited my strengths and actually helped them move from being seen, that particular organization, as a structured product house into a proper asset manager, help them transition into that so that they can get third-party mandates, which they were not getting.
Yes.
But I do think having a champion matters. I also think, ladies, sometimes it's not about the wrong organization. It's about whether there's alignment between you and the organization. Find an organization that works for you. It's important for me that I bring my soul to work. And so I went to an organization where I felt I could bring my soul to work. The other one, I felt like I was a number. So all those things create an environment where you flourish, where you can bring your best work. So that was quite important to me.
Thank you for that. I think I feel the same way. I mean, for me, it's about finding alignment and finding the right tribe, if that's the word.
Yeah.
And I think you all agree with me that when you saw these ladies present earlier, that you can see that they really are passionate about what they do and they believe in what they do in themselves. And that's what you want to bring out of anyone in the work environment. Thank you, Mabatho. Thembeka, according to CityWire's recent Alpha Female report, it will take the global asset management industry 127 years to transform. Being a South African working in the UK, two very different markets. Can you maybe share your experiences in terms of where there are similarities and differences between these two markets or industries?
I think maybe, in the macro level, perhaps there might be different dynamics that are impacting female participation rates generally. So, in emerging markets, South Africa included, women tend to be disproportionately impacted by, sluggish economies. etc. So it really can create a bit of a bottleneck about, the pipeline of talent going into the industry. Whereas in the UK, it's very much about quite high childcare costs. So you see a lot of women crashing out of the, labor force, as well as the asset management industry prematurely before they've been able to fully reach their potential. But I think from a micro level, the dynamics tend to be relatively similar.
Okay.
The reality is, I think asset managers keep recruiting the same way and hoping for a different result, which just doesn't work. So going to universities and going to certain finance courses, which tend to be disproportionately tailored to men, or men disproportionately go to those courses. So I think as an industry, the asset management, as an industry, asset management probably has to broaden out its horizons in terms of where it recruits. I mean, the reality is, having worked for, over 11 years, you understand that a lot of what you learn is actually on the job. So it's not impossible to, take people who are doing humanities and actually turn them into fund managers over time. And I think that's something a lot of businesses have been resistant in doing. The UK is probably better at that. They're probably more open-minded. I've worked with people who did history or psychology in university within both the investment banking and the fund management space. Whereas in SA, I think they're a bit more militant about, it has to be this degree, it has to be this school. And so I think really broadening out the horizons should definitely help pipeline. Another key issue is really, women actually tend to outperform men quite significantly within university. But for some reason, that changes the minute they get into the workplace. And I think to me, that's more indicative of the workplace than it is of women. And so that retention element is also super key. Whether you have allies or champions within the organization, and they could be men and women, everyone has a role to play as far as that is concerned. And I think that's some of the challenges that you have as well within the UK and South Africa, as far as allowing women to feel like they belong and that they can thrive in an organization. Because the reality is, once you go there and you don't see enough people who look like you in the positions that you'd want to be in, you start to believe that it's not possible. And that really results in retention issues. So I think from more of a micro level, the dynamics tend to be the same within the two markets. But I do think in South Africa, we probably do have to broaden out how we recruit. And in the UK as well, that's also become a bit of a problem, which is which is the changes that they're trying to implement by, attacking apprenticeships as well. So not really making a degree a requirement. And really just starting to recruit outside of the financial sector where, it's already a bias towards men. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you. I agree with you. Very similar in terms of what you just talked about. And we've all seen the research papers proving that companies that embrace diversity and inclusion within their strategies are more profitable and can therefore deliver better returns to investors. And you've proven that in your presentation by demonstrating to us how you invest. How do you believe that women can make an impact in investing? Yeah, like you have as a fund manager.
Yeah, I mean, as stated, there's actually a significant wealth transfer occurring in certain markets. So in South Africa, I think about a third of the wealth in South Africa is actually in the hands of women and growing. And within the UK, what you're finding is a lot of, households that were led by the baby boomers, because women tend to outlive men, those households then become female-led quite quickly. And given that the UK is quite an old population, that's why you're seeing a quite, large and accelerated wealth transfer to women. And so as investors, I think you can engage with companies that you're investing with. How are my assets being invested? Who are my assets being invested with? And I think those questions should drive change, because the reality is large companies, including asset managers, only act when it impacts their pocketbooks. And the reality is more and more women are holding the pocketbooks. And so by engaging with asset managers to better reflect, the needs of women by having more women in vital and commercial seats, I think that's one of the biggest ways that one could incite change within the industry. And then I think as well as a fund manager, we tend to use our votes as a way to tell a company where we think they should be. So actually, on not just the Diversity and Inclusion Fund, but of a lot of the funds across the equities floor in the UK, we actually vote against the chairman if they haven't or the chairperson rather, if they haven't reached, at least 33% gender diversity at board level. And that's already a good way to get, companies' attention, because obviously the chairperson is saying, well, why would this company vote against me? And that really starts a conversation as to how companies can become more diverse. And we've seen, changes occur. We had invested in a solar inverter company that changed its board to make it more gender balanced on the back of our engagements. Even large companies such as United Health actually will, have a conversation as far as, how can we do better and also be more attractive to European investors. So there's actually a lot more power that women hold within the industry and also outside of the industry as far as how is my pension being invested, et cetera. And I think probing and asking questions such as those from asset allocators is one of the key ways that one can make a difference.
And I think, with a woman sitting in that position, I think you can ask the softer questions and you can ask those tough questions that someone else may not be able to ask.
No, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Thembeka. Kaitlin, from your perspective, what role can women play in shifting the investment agenda towards a more social, economic, and environmentally driven way of thinking?
I think it's often almost a misconception, though, that responsibility sits with women. I mean, from our side, I think it sits with the entire team, and it's on every single member of the team to be able to integrate ESG, and whether some women are passionate about it and may want to get more involved, or there are also men who want to get more involved in the ESG agenda. And so for us, I think we've tried very hard in our team to get ESG to the level where it's so fully integrated that it's not something you can pick apart and say, all right, let's take the females of the team to run that portion. It's something that it's almost like looking at valuation of a company. We never take a team and say, you look at the fundamentals, you look at the valuation. It's something which needs to be fully integrated into that team. And I think every one of us are responsible for upskilling ourselves. I think the one issue with ESG is just that it's coming so quickly and so fast. And I suppose it's taking us all a while to catch up in terms of what is our responsibility in the asset management world in terms of ESG. And not just, I think in South Africa, we've always been exceptionally good at the governance side. I think we've always taken a very hard, long look at the governance side and often ignored the environmental and social side of things. And so I think upskilling ourselves and sharing that information amongst the team and essentially making everyone responsible is probably what we need to be doing.
Yes, equality.
Yes.
That's what we're all striving for, right? Mabatho, as the asset owner representative on this panel, and having sat in a number of boards of trustees, investment committees in this industry for a number of years, how does diversity and inclusion benefit members of retirement funds at board level?
I think it's so important to have that diversity. I must say, when I walk into a boardroom, I walk in there with my feminine power. And part of that feminine power is empathy, bringing empathy, kindness, looking out for fairness and justice. That when we make decisions, I'm making decisions and I'm thinking about them from sitting in the position of my members. Some people are very tick box. They tick box. They're very removed from how the impact of their decisions on members. They're very removed from that. So it's all very logical. So they don't understand how these things impact members, but also the responsibility at a broader level. Are we impacting members? How are we impacting society? And how are we impacting positive change? I mean, I'll give you a very simple example. And by the way, as a woman, I feel like we have an ability to pick up the nuances in the conversations, the things that are not being said.
Yes.
And if you have the courage to own your strength as a woman in that in that sort of environment, you can actually unlock those conversations for the betterment of the board and decision making. I'll just quote one example where the issue around empathy made a difference, or looking at things differently and being able to speak up for members. We had been paying in one particular board, we'd been paying pensioners on this board for 2 years. We've been overpaying them. The actuaries had come up with a valuation that meant that we were paying them more than they should be being paid. Not a lot of women on the board. I remember the chair saying, well, these people have benefited, and these were pensioners, these people have benefited unduly from us paying bigger pensions, and therefore we must get the money back. And everybody was quiet. I was thinking, I'm not sure I want a lot of dead pensioners here now, because we are now going to be bringing money back. So it was up to me as somebody who had empathy to say, it doesn't feel like the right decision for me. One, that the mistake wasn't done by pensioners, it was done by us. Secondly, we do have an error reserve within the fund that we can use for this sort of errors. And actually, as a result of me saying that, then other people spoke up to say, we were uncomfortable. But everyone was going to be quiet, and we were going to have decisions. And I consistently see that our biggest advantage is bringing that empathy and standing the shoes of other people to the party. I think it's very, very powerful.
Yeah,
I think on that, there's a book called Quiet, which really speaks to that. I'm also a naturally shy person, and I think it's really about using that as a strength, because you listen more if you're not speaking out, you're using empathy. So I would recommend reading the book Quiet, for anyone.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Mabatho, so you've been a professional mentor for over 10 years. You've sat as a director of the Transformation Action Forum as well. So what have been the key factors that have come out of those discussions that have flagged to you, these are the main barriers to entry into this industry?
One of the things I spoke about fairness and justice. I remember not long after I left the financial services industry, I used to have these dialogue sessions with women in financial services. And they said to them, what was important for them is organization that had that as a core value, fairness and justice. And it came a lot when they spoke about pay gaps, which still exist. For the same work, we are being paid less than the men. So that was unfair. But secondly, building organizations that embrace diversity. When you start meetings at 8 or before then, when women are taking children to school, it excludes them. Yeah. So during my time, there was a lot of attrition, especially of senior women thinking, I've had it, this thing is taking a toll on my health, is taking a toll on my family. Yeah. And I still speak to a lot of senior women who will tell me about a toll on their health because of the environment. Sometimes my voice is ignored. My male counterpart says the exact same thing a few minutes later. Everybody says, that's a good idea. But when I say it, it's not. So as one of the directors of the Transformation Action Forum, I think we've come to understand the power of being an asset owner in driving transformation or supporting transformation in this industry. Because you use the ability to allocate to influence the change in organizations. So, you say, where's the women representation? We know there's still underrepresentation when it comes to senior technical roles, portfolio management. We know CIOs. So you make allocation based on that and the broader transformation area. So we are committed to supporting that. I realize when you come together and unify, you can drive the change that you're looking for. Earlier, we're talking about women driving changes within the organization. Are you unifying and being strategic in building that advocacy voice from a transformation point of view? I think that's very important. And of course, getting the men to support you as well.
Yes, support is critical.
Yeah.
So we are out of time, but I'd like to ask one more question that I'd like Kaitlin and Thembeka to address, please. So as a new mom, so firstly, you're both very career-driven you're market leaders in your areas of expertise, and you're now embracing motherhood. You've just become a mom and you're about to become a mom. How do you plan on taking on this new challenge of work-life balance? And I'll leave it to the both of you to chat about that for a minute each.
Sure. Work-life balance, what's that? I actually have a toddler as well. And to be honest, I think one of the biggest challenges I had was going back into the workplace after maternity leave. I had a bit of an identity crisis because, I've always been very ambitious, first one in, last one out. Very, very much a big part of my identity was based on the successes that I had had. And so to come into an environment where I can't be the first one in or the last one out anymore, I can't pick up my hand as much to everything, or, there's just so much to do with so little time. That definitely was a rude awakening for me. And I realized, as much as people will say, oh, you can have it all, you can have it all. Someone once said something very interesting to me where they said, you can have it all, but not all at once. And so I had to really embrace that in terms of, okay, this is my moment. Let me figure out this mom thing. Let me not be too hard on myself, because it just felt like I was being suboptimal at home and suboptimal at work. And the reality is that it's just really about giving yourself a break every now and then. You're not doing as badly as you think you are, so I've heard. And so really, I think with this next baby and coming back into work, I plan to be a bit kinder to myself now. Yeah.
Thank you, Thembeka.
Yeah, and from my side, I suppose the family dynamic and family roles have had to be discussed a lot at home. And so I suppose expectations between what a wife and a husband does have changed over time as females have become more prominent and taking very similar jobs to their husband. And so my husband and I have had to have a lot of conversations around how we're going to actually split the responsibility, given we both are working. And so I suppose not just letting kind of societal norms sit on you that, okay, this is going to be the expectation for me. I need to still perform in every area. And I think in South Africa, we're very lucky that we can afford help compared to the UK, where I think things are very much more difficult. But yeah, so that's one element, is looking at the family dynamic. And the second would be speaking to people at work. And I think when I speak to some of my colleagues who have had children a few years ago, they were often too scared to, you feel guilty almost being pregnant and taking time out from work. And so because of that guilt, you don't actually ask for what you want in the workplace. And so a lot of it has also been, bringing up issues around flexibility and policies that probably need to be relooked at because they just don't work anymore. So, and that's another thing where it's that speaking up where you feel, something's not right. And actually a lot of people are also feeling that way, but just to be brave enough to speak up about it is very important. And I think just on the third thing, very similar to what you were saying, Thembeka, is I think it's going to be another period of self-reflection where I'm also going to have to take the pressure off me, because it's not like any of my colleagues have ever said to me, look, we need you to work double as hard when you get back. It's very much self-inflicted pressure. And actually, my male teammates have been completely understanding, and there's never been excess pressure on me so far and when I get back. And so it's actually just going to be getting my mind right that I don't have to continue to prove something just because of some time out of the workplace. So, yeah.
And that's why I think gender-neutral parental leave policies make sense. Is the onus on raising children is not just on women. And I think that's part of what creates a good conversation around, even men taking parental leave off sometimes to help out. And yeah, it's really about equality. It's not about, men versus women. How can we create an inclusive environment? And shared parental leave and gender-neutral parental leave policies are so key for that.
I fully agree. Thank you very much, ladies. It's been a pleasure hosting this panel with you. I'd like to give them a round of applause, please. And we'd now like to open the floor up to questions from the audience.
what drove you to want to change from the oil industry to the financial industry?
You know, for me, I felt like I understood business from every other angle except from a financial point of view. And it was important for me to build that, what I thought was a core competence that I felt was a gap that was missing. But also, the financial services industry looked, elite, exciting, cutting edge. And I wanted to be part and parcel of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that brings our session to conclusion. Thank you, everyone, for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure hosting you, and I hope that you found this session valuable.